What a great topic today. Oh, yeah. It'll be a miracle if we can cover as much as we want to in 20 minutes. So just by way of background about this kind of discussion, so I was raised in a non-religious household, and so there are some aspects of traditional Christianity that really baffle me, that I just don't get. And fortunately, I have a fabulous resource to go to with all of my questions, and that is our beloved Tom Baker, who is... Oh, you know what? I forgot my questions. 1 second. small oversight. There we go.
Women are so forgetful.
Back to our beloved Tom Baker.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so Tom is a former Catholic priest. How long ago was it that you left the priesthood, Tom?
I left in 1990.
Okay, been a little while now.
Oh, yeah.
And been a new thoughter. Been coming to Uni Renaissance for a good long while, and so it's just kind of the perfect person to ask these questions of that come to me. So when I started out thinking about matters related to sex and Christianity, I thought, well, this would be kind of fun, this would be interesting. And then I picked up this book, which I want to recommend to you. It's called Born of a Woman. It's by John Shelby Spong, and it's the subtitle, A Bishop Rethinks the Virgin Birth and the Treatment of Women by a Male-Dominated Church. So as I told Tom before we got started here this morning, I got pretty fired up and a little angry. So I just want to make really clear I'm not attacking you in any way when I get angry. So just you know, it's not that.
So don't kill the messenger.
Exactly. So anyway, so thank you for being willing. That's very brave of you. Okay. No, just kidding. All right, so let's just begin with, to me, what is one of the most obvious questions. Why does traditional Christianity treat sex, even as an expression of love between consenting adults, as something dirty or even evil?
Well, the short answer is original sin. When Augustine formulated the doctrine of original sin, in a kind of 4th century genetics, he said that the sin of Adam was communicated through the generations or transferred through the generations through sex. So if you had sex, you were bringing original sin into your life. Now, how that works is rather mysterious. Why would Adam's transgression affect us? I mean, there are lots of relatives that we've had that have done bad things, but they haven't affected our lives. It doesn't mean we've done bad things. So that's where it begins, and it sort of took energy from that, and women were put down. They were subordinate creatures.
Yeah. And, you know, interesting in reading a little bit more about the Adam and Eve creation story.
Yes.
That you talk about Adam's sin, but so much, I mean, the blame was really put on Eve.
Yes, it was.
And so from the very beginning, something I hadn't really realized, that sort of sexism in the church structure began with continuing the story of Adam and Eve, because she wasn't born as an equal to Adam. He was created, according to the myth, he was created. And God created all these animals for him to have as companions, and that wasn't enough. And then he decided to create her as a companion out of his rib, and she was there to serve him. And she's the one that ate the forbidden fruit and then tempted him. And so the whole stain of sin really had been on her from the beginning and continued to pass down. So this quote that I read in here, see if this resonates for you. Sex, clearly, for the church, was not designed for joy, for love, or for recreation. Sex was evil, save as means for keeping alive the human race. The sexuality of the woman was the most evil of all, for she was the source of male desire. All of these attitudes were part of the legacy that arose, at least to some degree, from the birth narratives in which a virgin was placed at the center of the Christian story, and we'll talk about that in just a moment.
Great.
Does that... No, but doesn't that resonate? I mean,
Yes.
this idea that somehow women are responsible, that women
Yeah.
are villainized for the desires that men have.
Right. And Eve was sort of the trouble in paradise.
Yeah.
She was the one that was tempted by the devil, and she tempted Adam. And so in the ways that human beings have in blaming one another, women were kind of blamed for the fall,
Yeah.
just like you said.
Right.
Well, because it's all mixed up. The Adam was responsible, being the man. So we don't even credit Eve with the sin, but we blame her for it.
Oh.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah. Yeah.
She loses both ways.
Yeah. So, why was it so important that Jesus' mother was a virgin and that Jesus also was a virgin? 'Cause there's just so much emphasis on that, even to the point of priests having to be celibate, etc.
Yeah, and I was celibate for 10 years. I controlled myself for 15 years. And I know what that's like. It's a hard thing to do. And we just assume that Jesus is celibate, or he didn't have sex, that he was a virgin and that Mary was a virgin, so they would not participate in original sin. So Jesus can be sinless and Mary can be sinless, but in order to remain sinless, they have to remain virgins. There's this thing called concupiscence. Concupiscence is your animal nature. We don't talk about this anymore. We don't talk about this is your animal nature and this is your heavenly nature,
Right.
and that kind of thing. But there was this thing called concupiscence. And it was kind of the animal nature of human beings. And it kind of boiled down to having sex.
Right, and so from what I've read, when the Greeks became more of an influence in Christianity, that there was a real philosophy then about your lower nature and your higher nature.
Right.
And everything associated with your lower nature was the human carnal impulses, and everything was elevated. Your whole purpose was to be in higher realms with what you were focused on in your spirituality. But to the point that the human part was made evil.
Well, yes, the human part was not only made evil, it was made kind of the way that you were. You with original sin, there's no freedom anymore. You can only do what you do in sinning. It's kind of interesting to me that Jesus came to forgive people, and modern day Christians call themselves sinners.
Oh.
What happened? Who got forgiven? What's forgiveness in the first place?
Yeah.
The whole thing begins with punishment and is lived out in sorrow.
Oh my God.
It's terrible.
It is terrible.
Had you sung that song in a Catholic church,
Yeah. It burst into flames.
the bishop, yes, burst into flame. I was going to say the bishop's socks would have fallen down, but yeah, it's
Well, I think it's interesting to note, Jesus isn't the only one who's said to have been born of a virgin. So I don't know if everybody knows this. And Bishop Spong has said before that in the time of Jesus and prior to that, virgin births, as he put it, were a dime a dozen. So some of those who supposedly had mothers who were virgins are the Buddha, Horus, a god of Egypt, Attis, Quirinus, I don't know how to say that, Indra, Adonis, Mithra, Zoroaster, Krishna, Perseus, Romulus. There's a whole long list of them. So I guess it was a way of trying to distinguish someone's greatness, right? To give them an elevated status. But when I think about it, for both the Virgin Mary and for Jesus, I feel really sad for them. They were robbed of their humanity. I mean, in the telling of this. So that aspect of them, their wholeness, if you will. Like, I want to look to Jesus as a symbol or a representative of wholeness, that he lived out every aspect of his humanity and his divinity. And it just seems to truncate that part of it. And to even deprive him of the love of a woman, a close, intimate relationship with a woman, which I absolutely believe he had with Mary Magdalene, seems unjust.
Yeah, I don't really think that the church ever believed that Jesus was human. I think they basically believed, as it is implied in the Gospel of John, that Jesus kind of came down from heaven as God, and that he kind of dabbled in humanity. He really wasn't vigorously a human being. Now, this is contradicted by the scriptures, in which Jesus loves to party, he loves to eat, he loves to drink. I guess he loved to get tipsy. He loved all those things. Interestingly enough, they're things that we then laugh at. We think, that Jesus, that amazing Jesus, he would come down to us, which is the result of this kind of truncated view of the spiritual up here and the human down here, and what's up here is good and what down here is bad. It's a simplistic way to look at it.
Yeah, but it also gets back to sort of traditional Christianity portraying Jesus as the great exception, something that no one could ever aspire to.
Right.
Whereas in New Thought and in Unity, we see him as the great example. So we want to live into the same consciousness and the same wholeness that he exemplified.
Yes.
So I remember in 2012, there was a discovery made of a little piece of papyrus. Does anybody remember this? And it had a reference to my wife. Jesus said something about my wife, and it just set off a whole firestorm about whether that was authentic, and just to me, sort of an unbelievable reaction to quash that immediately. Any possibility that he was married. Why?
Well, because the super Christians of the day were desert fathers. They would go out into the desert and they would meditate and they would pray, and they were not married. In a kind of male-dominated society or a male-dominated religion, if you're going to overcome your passions, the passion that is most obvious is the sexual passion if you're a man. So to overcome your sexual passion was like an act of heroism. It gave you status in the spiritual world. And so it got to be that Jesus just couldn't be married because he was too spiritual to be married.
So the thing that gets me about this is, you could see it as sort of noble to be more disciplined for a man in his passion. So you could see that. But what really becomes evident in the way women are treated in the Bible is that the women were blamed for it. That it wasn't so much about a man building up his self-discipline and sort of higher awareness as it was blaming the woman for being a temptation.
Yes, and that was kind of drummed into us in the seminary. In fact, when I was a priest, I could not ride a woman in my car in the front seat. She had to sit in the back seat because her little hand might come over to me, and touch me. That would be awful. So,
Tom, what was that like for you?
Frustrating.
I mean, yeah. But didn't you feel like, well, okay.
What did I feel like?
I mean, didn't you feel like cut off from a really essentially human part of yourself?
Yeah. Oh. Didn't exactly cut it off, but
Well,
it had to lay dormant.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So, the part of this that got me kind of worked up is this.
Remember, when a woman is angry, she is very articulate.
I don't want to. No, so this is what got me upset. Well, there are many aspects of this in a patriarchal, male-dominated religion, how women were treated as second-class citizens, and the sexism pervades the Bible. Well, it does Christianity, I should say. Not Jesus' teachings, but anyway, but it's the treatment of Mary Magdalene. And what I picked up from this book is that it was very intentional, very purposeful on the part of the church in this way. I'll just read it. By the turn of the first century, there was in the life of the Christian church a clear need to remove Mary Magdalene, the flesh and blood woman who was at Jesus' side in life and in death, and to replace her with a sexless woman, the Virgin Mother. The record of history is that this was accomplished by portraying Magdalene as a prostitute and thus assassinating her character. By the time the first years of the second century began to pass, Mary, the mother of Jesus, dominated the field. She was portrayed as understanding, faithful, cooperative, and docile. And this image of what a woman is became the replacement for the dangerous love model reflected in Magdalene. Mary the Virgin was not only loyal, but was so pure that she could not experience either lust or carnal desire. Real feminine power was suppressed, and a woman who was manageable took that place in the tradition. It served the constant male agenda that perpetually desired to dominate and control the female. What do you have to say to that, Tom?
I think it was awful.
It was awful. Mm-hmm. Because I really do believe Mary Magdalene was not only his wife, but his partner in ministry, that they served together. And interestingly, this book was written in the 1992. That's how old this book is. And Bishop Spong is already saying in there that it is obvious, if you look through the Gospels, the many ways in which Mary Magdalene is given prominence, the ways in which she holds a higher place, and ways that point to her being his wife in language and customs and all that kind of thing, which is a lot to go into. But then it becomes, and there's not one shred of evidence in the Bible that she was a prostitute, not one. And the Catholic Church has since rescinded that characterization of her. But everybody, it's implanted in everybody's head, isn't it? It's the first thing you think of. So they were actually very successful in suppressing her and then raising this idea of the Virgin. The Virgin Mary was defined by the men who shaped Christianity based on the male value system and things appreciated in a woman. She was pure, obedient, docile, and powerless.
It's terrible. You're right.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's really outrageous. Okay, we can move on now, but thank you for that. Really? Come on. So, Tom, how have these teachings affected women and men and society over the ages?
Well, I think that, first of all, Genesis kind of makes you hate yourself because you're so bad. And then you pile on top of that you're inferior and you're worthless and you're not an equal person with your husband or with your friends who are male. This affected marriage. It affects marriage to this day.
Yeah.
It says in Genesis that a woman will yearn for her husband and he will lord it over her. That's written in Scripture. So people read that and they think, well, that's how I'm to be married. I'm going to lord it over my wife. Yeah. I'm a marriage counselor. I deal with Genesis every day.
Wow. It's so ingrained, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the subservient role of the woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which birth control and abortion has helped to free.
Right. But we can see where it began. We can see where this idea. So here's what my last quote that I'm going to offer. Since no one save Mary could achieve the ideal state of Virgin Mother, all other women were taught that they might approach virtue by being either virgins or mothers. they could join the nunnery and live out the role of virgin purity, or they must be perpetual mothers, producing as many offspring as God would grant, regardless of the impact of a large family on the health and well-being of the mother. Sex had no saving purpose except reproduction, which helped me understand the Catholic teachings around abstinence, or as the only
Abstinence,
the only
birth
form
control,
of birth control, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty unhealthy, isn't it?
Yes, it's
It's kind of cruel, really.
yeah, yes. You're putting words in my mouth. It's been as cruel for women, or for men in some ways, as it is for women. Christianity has a very pessimistic view of human beings. In this church, without original sin, you have the unity church. That's what the church will look like in the future, in my opinion, as we get over these ideas. So that's the hopeful side of this.
I never realized original sin was so foundational to all of it.
It's huge. It's huge. That's what Jesus is saving us from, is Adam's sin. See, that's why the cross and the crucified Jesus is so large in our imaginations, because it was we're bad, he's good, God's mad at us, and so Jesus is sad and has to suffer for us. And it's just a rough way to live. It's an unhappy way to live.
And not only that, but I feel like we missed the point of his teachings.
Yes, we
This
did.
is not what he taught. That's not at all what he taught. And in his band of disciples were women as well as men, and likely many of those disciples were married, and he probably was as well. And the respect that he showed to women, it is actually chronicled in the Bible. You can read the stories of how he treated women, not as second-class citizens, but rather lifting them up and respecting and honoring them.
Well, the fact that Jesus spoke to women as people and as friends caused him to have a bad reputation. Part of what people didn't like about Jesus is that he treated women as equals and Mary Magdalene as his equal. That put people's Jesus was put in low regard because of that.
Yeah. So it's like what we're about is trying to recapture the truth of his teachings, recapture what was really there instead of the overlay or the misconstruction by the organized church.
Yes. Yeah,
So what would it take to make things different quickly on the church's part?
quickly?
Well, okay, not. I guess it's a little late for quickly, but what would it take for the organized church to make a course correction of import?
Courage, honesty, sanity. The church would have to kind of take into account the discoveries of psychology. It would have to take into account the common sense that women and men are equal.
And so that would be reflected. You had mentioned to me two things that you thought the church could do. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay, it was.
But you do.
Yes, it was to remove the celibacy requirement on priests and to allow women into the priesthood.
Yes.
That those two things would change everything.
Yeah.
I agree too, because in addition to the celibacy, obviously there have been horrible things done to children by priests, and because of that repressed, I guess, urge in them.
Yeah, yes.
No. No, ma'am.
It's okay, Sheila.
We're actually already 10 minutes up. That's for later in the service. Anything else you want to add, Tom?
Well, from knowing you seem to me, if the church would change, you would be an excellent Catholic priest.
not happening. Maybe in a future life.
You're the future of the church.
Well, you know what? Let me just say, I do believe unity is the future of Christianity. I really do. I really do. And it's been, we see more and more signs of that. You know, it sometimes seems like it's a monolith, but cracks are happening in the organized church. There's infighting. There's, you know, people are leaving. There's just a lot of seeking for who are we going to be after this. And I believe that we're ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. So anyway, well, Tom, thank you for being up here with me today.
One thing I'd like to say is probably the most important phrase in the Unity Church for me is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. That makes us equal, not only men and women, but it makes us equal with Jesus.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.